Hey, greetings, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, the Executive Director of the American Constitutional Rights Union and the ACRU Action Fund, as well as the Committee to Support and Defend America's Constitutional Conservative Veterans Organization. Welcome to another episode of Live Free TV, brought to you by the American Constitutional Rights Union. And thank you for visiting our website, theacru.org, theacru.org, as well as supportanddefend.org, and keeping up on all the things that have been going on. Like last week, when I had the opportunity of riding my motorcycle from Garland, Texas, down to Brunswick, Georgia, and it was great to be back down in my birth state and there in southeast coastal Georgia for a motorcycle ride to support the Golden Isles Veterans Village. So please check that out. It's posted there on the ACRU website and also the Committee to Support and Defend website. Because when you look at our veterans, we got to make sure that we're taking care of them and making sure that they are living the quality of life that they have without a doubt earned by way of them saying that they will support and defend the Constitution and putting their lives on the line for this great country. And speaking of putting their lives on the line for this great nation, I was only called out a few times to have to go and, deploy. But when I look at our law enforcement officers, they do it every single day. They go out there, and as George Orwell said, a nation sleeps peacefully at night because rough men and now women stand ready to do violence on her behalf. And that's what we have in our law enforcement officers. But one of the reasons why we started the Defender Initiative, because we saw the American Civil Liberties Union and several other leftist organizations going after law enforcement officers who were doing what they are supposed to do, enforce the law. Now, you've seen, we've been to many different states, we've been to many different locales, to include going up there and having press conferences in the state of Maryland, where in the state of Maryland, Governor Wes Moore signed into law something that was very perplexing to me, telling law enforcement officers they can't enforce the law. And now we have the exact same thing happening in the state of New York, where Governor Kathy Hochul, and I think it's because of all the pressure that the Marxists are putting inside the Democrat Party, with them wanting to have open borders. They want to abolish ICE. They don't want us to have prisons. They want to release criminals. Well, now all of a sudden, in the state of New York, they're sending out notices to 12 different sheriffs, telling them that they must cease any cooperation and coordination with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, ICE, under the 287G program. And there are three different models under the 287G program. This is exactly what is happening in many of these blue states around the country. And like I said, I went up there and highlighted that in Maryland when I stood there with Rachel Morin's mother. And think about that. In the state where a young 30-something-year-old mother of five, who's just out doing what any healthy American woman would want to do, go for a run, she was brutally raped and killed by a criminal illegal immigrant there in the state of Maryland. But yet, in the state of Maryland, and now New York is following suit, they're telling law enforcement that they cannot work with ICE to get these criminal illegal immigrants, the worst of the worst, off of our streets. Now, let's just go back once again and review the law, because obviously there are people like Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York, Governor Wes Moore, Governor Kathy Hochul, and a whole bevy of these leftists. I've been up there in Chicago with Mayor Brandon Johnson and, of course, Pritzker, the governor there of Illinois. They don't understand that unauthorized entry into the United States of America is a federal offense. It's a first time misdemeanor. Then subsequent times after that, which we continue to see, are these repeat offenders, is felony offenses. Now, that is Title 8 or Title 18, United States Code 1325. So that's the law. And when we have sheriffs, especially, who are duly elected constitutional law enforcement officers that are following the law, and as a matter of fact, if you want to talk about the Constitution, Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, known as the Guarantee Clause, two things that the federal government is supposed to guarantee to every state. The second thing is that they're supposed to protect every state in the Union from invasion. And during the Biden administration, when we said, by way of lifting changing 90 to 95 different executive orders. You just opened up the borders. You just said that people could come here illegally. And oh, by the way, this whole temporary protective status thing, that's not an enumerated power to the president under Article 2. Matters of immigration and naturalization, that is an enumerated power to Article 1, which is the legislative branch. So once again, we see all of these unconstitutional actions. So when you hear this thing about sanctuary cities and sanctuary states, that's unlawful. It's illegal. Because basically, what they're saying is that we want to be able to harbor people that have broken the law, which means that you are an accomplice. You are complicit with the crime that they're committing. And even on top of that, when we see all of these people that are going out and obstructing, interfering, and impeding federal law enforcement operations, that's a violation of Title 18, United States Code 111. You cannot do that. That is a felony offense. And so someone needs to let these leftists know that. But then again, they don't care because no borders, no walls, no USA at all. I remember Antifa shouting that back during the first Trump administration. So, what do we have going on here? We have a series, the left always likes to talk about a threat to democracy. We just saw that there were, some 6,000 illegal immigrants on the voter registration rolls who actually did vote in New Jersey. The left and this policy of open borders, the left and these Marxists, their policy of not wanting to police our streets of people who have broken the law to be here and then committing crimes on top of that. This is a issue of the United States Constitution because once again, when you read the Constitution, Article 6, Section 2, which is known as the Supremacy Clause, when the federal government, the United States, that's what the federal government is and referred to back in the Constitution, when they are acting in pursuance thereof, those are the three key words, in pursuance thereof to the rule of law, when they're enforcing our laws, when they're enforcing our national sovereignty. Well, all of these other jurisdictions, counties, cities, states, they are not supreme over the federal government. They cannot tell local law enforcement officers, sheriffs, that they can't work with federal agencies that are enforcing the law because the federal law is supreme over what these states are trying to do because the Constitution says so in the Supremacy Clause. And it's very funny how the leftists like to throw the Supremacy Clause out there when they think it works to their advantage. But even me sitting here in Dallas County of Texas, I live in the city of Garland, but in Dallas County, Texas, we have a sheriff by the name of Marion Brown. She doesn't work with ICE. And she's very forthright about it. And guess what she's doing? Number one, she's not enforcing the law, so she's violating her oath. And then number two, she's violating the law here in the state of Texas that was passed that says local sheriffs must work with ICE in order to eradicate and eliminate criminal illegal immigrants. So I think that this is a case, and of course, these 12 sheriffs are saying not going to do it. We're going to continue to do what we're supposed to do based upon the rule of law, based upon our constitutional duty and responsibility to uphold the law. But here's a bigger issue that I think everyone should come to understand. These Democrat establishment types, I love how they say the Democrat establishment, they're all together. They can act like they don't like the quote unquote Democrat Socialists of America who are just openly Marxists. But covertly, all of these Democrats believe and think the same way. They don't, they opened up our country to an invasion. And we haven't even talked about the hundreds of thousands of single military age males that came into this country. They have made it such a threat to the people on the ground here that it is inconceivable. It is unconscionable. When you think about young women like Laken Riley, Rachel Moran, Kate Steinle, Jocelyn Nungare, the 12-year-old here in Houston, Texas, who was viciously raped and killed by members of Trinity Aragua. But yet, what they're saying is that they don't want local law enforcement to work with the ICE agents and the ICE agency, which is the federal government agency which is upholding immigration law. And guess what that means? See, if the law enforcement does not apprehend these people, coordinate with ICE, and then turn them over in the law enforcement facility under a 287G program, Guess what ICE has to do? They have to go out into the communities. They have to put themselves in danger. They have to put the communities in danger because they still have to go out there and enforce the law, which means eliminating criminal illegal immigrants from our streets. So, really and truthfully, this is what we called in the military the self licking ice cream cone. That the left is creating the problem that they then come back and say, we've got to get rid of ICE because ICE is the problem. Well, if in Maryland, Wes Moore, quote unquote, a Army veteran, I don't think this guy understands his oath to the Constitution. He definitely doesn't understand his oath as the governor of the state of Maryland. But, and Kathy Hochul, Governor Pritzker, all of you, all y'all, as we say down south, if you were to cooperate with ICE, that means that we don't have ICE agents going into communities. That local law enforcement who know their communities better than anyone else, the sheriffs, the police departments, they can go out and they can get these people. They can work with ICE. They know the detainers that are out there, and they can easily transfer these people over in those local law enforcement facilities. But when you say that the local law enforcement will not be allowed to work with ICE, then ICE has to still go in and do their job, which means they have to go into the communities. So again, the Marxist left are creating a problem that they then try to turn to ICE and say that they're the problem. When if you just followed the rule of law, all y'all, then we wouldn't have this situation. We wouldn't have this issue. See, I think that eventually this has to be something that the United States Supreme Court steps into. And of course, we know that the Marxist left does not want the United States Supreme Court. The DSA is already saying get rid of it. And of course, the regular everyday Democrats, they want to pack the Supreme Court with people that will be judicial activists. So at some point in time, someone has to stand up and say to Governor Hochul or Governor Westmore, you're in violation of the Constitution. You're committing unlawful, unconstitutional, immoral acts, and you need to be held responsible and accountable. Because again, if they're telling local law enforcement, they're telling sheriffs, and sheriffs are elected by the people. They're not appointed by a governor or whatever. But if they're telling the sheriffs that they can't do their job, what are they telling the sheriffs to do? Are they telling them to turn a blind eye and allow people to operate on our streets that should not be here, who have broken the law? Coming into the country illegally is a violation of our law. Committing crimes on top of that is even worse: rape, assault, murder. I mean, think about the commercial drivers that are out there here illegally that have been killing Americans on our streets. How does that happen? How does a state grant to people that are here illegally a license to drive an 18-wheel truck and they can't even read and understand our language? The Supreme Court is going to have to step in on this. And we here at the American Constitutional Rights Union, we stand on the side of the rule of law. We stand on the side of what the Constitution says. We stand on the side of what United States statute and code says. That people who have come into this country illegally, they should be apprehended, detained, and deported. Just the same as people that are doing even worse. They should be apprehended, detained, and deported after they're held accountable for their crimes. But to have governors, mayors, and other elected officials choosing an ideological agenda over the rule of law, putting the safety and security of American citizens at risk because of what? They want votes. They want to stay in power. They want to have control. No. To the sheriffs there in New York, the 12 sheriffs, and to my brothers there in the state of Maryland, stand strong. Do not allow yourselves to be coerced, intimidated, or driven into a position of subservience and surrendering your constitutional duty and responsibility. As I sit here right now, today is the 30th of July. Tomorrow is the 31st of July. 44 years ago, I took my oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I took that obligation freely without any purpose of evasion or mental reservation, that I said I would willfully and faithfully execute the duties of the office upon which I was about to enter. That was 44 years ago tomorrow. I will continue to support and defend the Constitution and not allow people to undermine our rule of law. That's how you live free. That's how you remain steadfast and loyal.